what do we think about what's happened at COP28?
Well, we need to see the detail of the deal, don't we? I mean, the most important thing here is that we keep that ambition of keeping the rising global temperatures to 1.5. We keep that alive. And that means a rapid transition away from fossil fuels, which I understand is in the deal. Now, we need that in this country. I just don't see that, and that ambition from the current government. I mean, we've seen Rishi Sunak sort of undermine our ambitions. Now, under the Labour government, if we win the next general election, we will be investing rapidly in renewables so that we get to clean energy by 2030. That's not much time, but we need that scale of ambition. We don't see it from the current government.
When will Labour phase out fossil fuels completely?
Well, as fast as possible, obviously. And before we can make a commitment to a date for phasing it out, we need to make sure that we are phasing in more and more renewables. We are committed to net zero by 2050, net zero overall, but net zero energy by 2030 is really significant. That's important as well.
That's exactly what this government is.
Well, they're not doing it, though. I mean,
yeah, but that's their commitment.
Their commitment may be that, but for 13 years, we've seen virtually stagnant growth on onshore wind, which is the cheapest form of energy production that we have. Now, Labour government would double onshore wind. We would invest in solar, triple onshore solar. We would also invest in offshore wind. We would quadruple that amount. We would be researching tidal and wave. We're an island nation with a great untapped resource in tidal and wave. We know all of that is necessary. We know it's urgent. And to get to 2030 net zero energy, we would have that urgency of ambition, which I just don't see from this weak Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, who is flailing all over the place.
What would you do about immigration issues?
Well, we know that immigration will fall if you have a proper workforce plan, and a current government does not have one. Now, we have an industrial strategy, in contrast to the government, who just has the word archived on their website.
You don't have any plans.
I know they say that, and yet they are the ones whose own permanent secretary has said that the Rwanda plan will be no deterrent, and the UK's Court of Appeal has ruled their plan unlawful. Now, we have a plan, so if we want to go just an alternative to Rwanda, we would cancel the Rwanda plan and use that money, which is 400 million and rising. We would use that to boost up the National Crime Agency to go after the criminal gangs, but also critically, something the government has utterly failed on, is to clear that backlog by employing 1,000 new caseworkers at scale, at pace, so that they could clear that backlog, which at the moment is costing the UK taxpayer £8 million per day. And a cost of living crisis in particular, that's unforgivable. But given that that's leaving people who may be a danger to this country, unprocessed, languishing, waiting for a decision, that's just not OK for UK security.
But didn't you guys have a really quite major immigration problem in the late noughties, 2008-ish?
And yet, during the last Labour government, we were deporting people who were not safe to be here at a rate of, I believe, at 1.1 every 8 minutes. Now, that's a complete contrast to the Tories at the moment, who are failing.
It's a challenge.
It is a challenge, but in order to meet a challenge, you have to do the hard yards. You've got to get down with the detail. Well, sending people to Rwanda is going to be only a few hundred ever. Now we have a backlog of a large amount.
That's what it is.
It's not really deterring anyone, though, is it? And the reason
Numbers
it's
are down
not,
a third.
that's the Albanians with whom the government negotiated agreement, which we support, to make a returns agreement. Now, that has worked as a deterrent because it's a clear bilateral arrangement. We would like them to do more of that. However, the deterrent effect of Rwanda is nil. All we've done so far is send 3 Home Secretaries.
How do you know?
Well, the government said it would start deterring last year, and it's not done anything of the sort. Now, the reason I know is because they're only ever going to take a few hundred, whereas we have thousands of people arriving and staying in hotels waiting for a decision for months or even years. So if you are someone who is on the coast in Calais and you're thinking, actually, I've got family over in the UK, I'm desperately fleeing, so, for example, Afghanistan, people we promised to have a safe life for and haven't brought them here. If you are desperate to get here and place your life in the hands of criminal gangs, your chances of going to Rwanda are vanishingly small, even if the plan ever gets off the ground. Whereas at the moment, we've got a plan that's cost £100 million per Home Secretary. That's 3 Home Secretaries who've gone to Rwanda and a total of 0 asylum seekers. That's not a plan, and it's not working.
As a politician, I'm guessing your conviction is to want to make people's lives better.
Yes.
That's why you go into politics.
Yes,
and then you see someone who came here for a better life and is so overwhelmed that they take their own life. On the Bibby Stockholm yesterday.
It was very upsetting news, and my heart goes out to him.
I thought it was devastating.
It was terrible. Absolutely devastating.
Gone through all of that.
All of that. And to come here and feel so overwhelmed by the conditions you're in, by what you're dealing with, the trauma maybe. But I don't want to speculate on the circumstances because there will be an investigation, rightly so. But my heart goes out to him.
Would you get rid of those boats?
Well, we think those boats are not the way to deal with
So you would
asylum
get rid of them?
seekers. Yes, by bringing down the backlog. And that's how you get rid of them. And that shows that the government just isn't taking notice of the real problem right in front of them, which is a massive backlog, which is not good for anyone.
Let me go back to well, we haven't actually touched on the vote last night, but I wonder, would Labour join the Lib Dems in calling for an investigation over whether Rishi Sunak breached the ministerial code by failing to declare the extra £100 million payment that you've just been talking about there to Rwanda?
Well, I would have to look at the detail of that, but what matters, I think, is the sheer chaos that this government is in. I mean, it's extraordinary, isn't it, Kay, that people are even speculating about the future of Rishi Sunak's leadership barely a year into the job. Here we are. He should have been preparing all weekend for his appearance in front of the COVID inquiry, and that's a whole load of things that we could get into. But also, instead of that, he had to be handing out breakfast butties to his backbenchers yesterday to try and get them to walk.
That's not easy to say, is it? Did
It's not easy to say. Well, breakfast
bacon butties to his backbenchers.
That's quite the tongue twister,
Yes,
isn't it?
It was.
But I mean, you know, the problem with that is that he was doing that, and if I'm going to continue the pun, to save his own bacon, and that is quite something when you've got a government with really quite a big majority. No, absolutely none, because it's the country that's being let down here. Nothing works. Everybody knows it. The country's crying out for change. Any way you get to work at the moment, you're going to have to plan for what happens if the bus doesn't come or the car goes into a pothole. We have a situation where there's a cost of living crisis, which the government doesn't seem to be able to do anything with. This morning, we've just had the news that economic growth has gone backwards, but that's on top of 13 years of stagnant economic growth, stagnant wages and rising taxes. I don't feel sorry for Rishi Sunak at all. It's time for change. This government has failed, and I can't wait for a general election.
Speaking of which, I've noticed that all you front benchers are all looking particularly sharp. Have you all got yourself a new stylist? You look fantastic.
Well, that's nice of you, Kay. I've got the same hairdresser I've had for years, who is thankfully completely uninterested in politics and devotes herself entirely to keeping my hair looking crisp.
Oh, well, she does it well. It's
Thank
good to
you.
see you. Thanks very much indeed.